Welcome back. We're going to add another episode to the Help Me series, and in this particular segment, we're going to look at being vulnerable. And so, the video that we're about to review is actually two clips that come from a live stream that a very nice and a very educated YouTuber did by the name of the Blooming Ebony. She has a panel of married women, and they're discussing the pros and cons of being vulnerable. I think it was a good video. I'm encouraging you to go watch it in its entirety. I'll have the link supplied in the description. So let's get into the first clip and see what we can glean from it, okay?
And Caprice, let's go to you.
No, I don't believe it has made me unstable. Um, yeah, no. So it didn't make me unstable. It made me be more receiving. Like when I'm like vulnerable with my husband, I can receive like more so his input, and instead of like having like a wall up, I can receive his view. I can receive corrected, like it's being corrected if I need, like if I'm wrong in that sense. So yeah, the ability to be like to feel and to receive. So no, I don't feel unstable when I'm vulnerable and
Okay. So here, uh, Japrice is one of the panel members. She is also one of the ladies that accompanied me on CJ's podcast, the High Value Nurse. And so, looking at some of the things that she just said, now the question is supplied below. Did the feeling of being vulnerable with your spouse ever make you feel unstable? Unstable is the term that I would gravitate toward because in a relationship, it would seem that we've been taught, both male and female, especially in our community, that to be vulnerable is to be unstable. You always have to have your guard up. You always have to protect yourself. But is that really necessary in this instance? According to Japrice, absolutely not. Because all of the things that she described that come along with being vulnerable were positive things. She was able to entertain the views of her husband. She was able to take correction if necessary from her husband. It added a level of, I would say, a level of trust to her and her husband's relationship. And as she speaks about it, if you notice her body language, she is very, very joyful in describing her vulnerability with her husband because she has seen that it works. She's seen what it produces. And so I think that this particular clip was wonderful to see. A married woman, a married black woman saying that vulnerability is something that should be used in the relationship to promote intimacy, closeness, trust, but then also love. All of that is part of being vulnerable. And as men, we definitely appreciate it. But let's go to the next clip and see what we can find out, okay?
Thank you. And last but not least, Shanna. Did the feeling of being vulnerable with your spouse ever make you feel unstable?
It did in the past, and when I say past, I mean like last month. It would make me showing vulnerability made me feel like I was like naked, like exposed, and I didn't like that feeling. So I try and like balance it out by directing attention to him and hitting him where it hurts. So then now I'm tough. I'm not naked anymore. So I would say it made me feel unstable. And I think you mentioned it earlier. I wasn't aware that I was hurting actually myself doing that and hurting the relationship. But yes, it definitely made me feel unstable, and I would try and bring stability back by hitting them where it hurt.
Okay. So there we have a real life account of how being vulnerable can make a person unstable. Now let's look at that for just a second. Let's think about that. Now, as Shauna, as she put it, being vulnerable was like she was naked, right? She was naked, openly exposed, and that's what I gather from it. She was exposed, and in a lot of situations, that's not something that we welcome. Being openly exposed, being seen for exactly what we are, without any of the protection that we could usually muster. But now, uh, as she mentioned, one of her reflex actions, one of the things that she did in response to her showing vulnerability, is that she would direct attention to her husband, some of the things that he may have been lacking. And in doing that, then she would find protection for herself, because now the conversation has switched from her ability to be vulnerable to his. And as she mentioned, it was a situation where she would hit him where it hurts. And that's a common reaction. You think about it. That's a common reaction. Even within marriage and then the closest relationships that you could have, individuals fight not to be vulnerable, because this society does not, it doesn't smile on being vulnerable. It doesn't. There's not a positive light that's painted in regards to how it is that a person can be vulnerable and still be accepted in this world, because the world is not geared toward that. The world is geared towards showing strength at all times. Trust me, I know. And so, in an effort to be vulnerable, we have to learn that. And we have to learn that there are certain places where it's okay to be vulnerable. There's certain relationships where we have to be vulnerable in order for those relationships to grow and thrive and prosper. And marriage is one of them. Because being vulnerable allows your partner to know that they can also be vulnerable. And so the trust that you have between each other, the confidence that you have in each other, will cause the relationship to grow in a positive direction. And in most cases, the love will be abundant. So now we're going to consider the last clip, and the video will highlight a question that needs to be answered. And I think this question is noteworthy. So let's get into the next clip and see exactly what I mean.
Yes, I do believe that men crave vulnerability. And I'm realizing that more lately, only from my own experience with my husband. And he's probably listening now, I'm not sure. But I found that me being more vulnerable, I feel like he's more attracted to me ever since I've been more vulnerable. And when I do have certain vulnerable moments, like he'll even hug me and smile. Like I can tell that I wouldn't say he likes it. It's just like, maybe it's just a natural instinct for a man to just like that. Like they want that, they crave it. But I feel that it's made him more attracted to me. I'm not saying he wasn't before, but it's a whole different type of attraction with me. Like I said earlier, I felt naked when I was vulnerable before. Like I feel like I was exposed. Like, oh no, like don't look at me. But then I realized, like, he's my husband. He can see me naked. Like it's okay to be exposed to him. Like what the heck? So yes, I feel just from my experience that men do crave that vulnerability from women.
Okay. So those two clips really highlight what it means to be vulnerable. But that last clip that we considered, I think, was very noteworthy, because being able to speak as a man, I think that that is very appealing. It's very appealing, because as I mentioned, if you have a partner who is okay with being vulnerable, then that means that it's okay for you to do it. And so we, as men, we absolutely crave it, because of the things that we have to face during the day, the difficulties. As I mentioned one time in another podcast, we are engaged in a war for resources. We're out there fighting to make sure that we can provide what's needed for our families. And so when we come home, it's absolutely a wonderful thing to know that we can put our armor down at the door and be accepted for who we are, whatever our emotions are, however we feel, whatever we may be thinking. Even if the thoughts are disquieting and the thoughts are negative, we feel free to share them with this person who has come to be our safe place. So that vulnerable nature that a woman can offer to a man is invaluable. It's invaluable. And it's a strength, I think, because you open yourself up to be hurt, you open yourself up to be harmed, but if both can look at vulnerability as a strength, the ability to allow someone in, or to allow them to be close to you, to allow them to know who you really are without all of the armor and the protection that you would usually have to equip when going into the world, to be able to strip those things off and just be who you are. I think the only thing that will result from that is a stronger relationship, because it promotes trust, it promotes a feeling of intimacy, it promotes love in the long run. Because the more you get to know each other, the more you can value each other, the better you can deal with each other. So I appreciated this particular clip. Now, what are my final thoughts? Vulnerability is a strength. It is. It's one that needs to be cultivated, not just by the sisters, but also the brothers in our community. We need to cultivate that, because there are so many times that there are women in our lives who crave our attention. They want to know how we feel. And if we're not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, we disconnect ourselves from what it is that they want. And as a man, I understand, brothers, that that's a difficult thing to do, because most of the time in our lives, how we feel, it has no bearing on the situations around us. And I think that because of that, then, we're reluctant to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to open up. But we have to do it. And we have to do it because we value the relationship that we have with our spouse. We value the relationship that we have with our family members. And in each of those relationships, there is a certain degree of vulnerability that we have to employ, because we want to maintain those relationships. And a lot of times being vulnerable allows other individuals to see when it is that you really need help, and they can offer that help, especially if you are the kind of man that prides himself in being a provider and a protector. You see, you bring value to the relationship by what you do, and she brings value to the relationship by what she does. So as you are protecting and providing, she's nurturing, she's being vulnerable, and she's helping you to continue despite the difficulties that are around you. Powerful video. As I mentioned, this is from a YouTuber named The Blooming Ebony. If you go back in the video, she is the lady that is up at the top left. And the ladies as a whole did a wonderful job. After watching the video, my perception of what vulnerability, it really changed. So I'm going to have to start working on being vulnerable also. And I think it's worth it. So we appreciate you coming back, considering the thoughts that we had. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the video. As always, be easy.